Okay, here we go. Um, got a great picture of the ceiling, but this is the way I'm sitting to the computer. Sorry about that, because the camera is like right there. Okay, this is a three for today with the quotes. Well, I do have a particular reason, and basically the reason I did that today is to show the difference in the people who made these quotes. They're all about the same thing and have pretty much the same comment, but the wide variety of people is the major point here. So the first one, let me go back in ancient history, and this one comes from Plato, or at least it's a translation of whatever he said. Obviously, he said it in Greek, so this is somebody's translation, and I don't know who translated it. But reality is created by the mind. We can change our reality by changing our mind. Okay. Then Benjamin Hoff, he wrote The Tao of Pooh, as in Winnie the Pooh. Reality is what one makes it, and the more negative reality one nurtures and creates, the more of it one has. And the last one is Robert T. Kiyosaki. And this Robert is the author of the series of, some of you have heard it, of Rich Dad Poor Dad. So he talks about getting money. What you think, what you think is real is your reality. Okay. So basically, the idea of essentially reality is in your mind and what you make of it. Now, before you say, wait a minute here, reality is reality, let's ask one question. What's a clean room? Now, you're going to say, strange question, but think about this. Let's say you're 15. What's your definition of a clean room? Let's say you're the parent of the 15-year-old. What's the definition of the clean room? Let's say you're the parent of 3 children under the age of 8. What's your definition of a clean room? What's your definition of a clean room if you're single, regardless of your age, assuming, of course, that you're out on your own? And if you're, say, 80, what's your definition of a clean room? Same phrase, different times of life, different situations, and you could come up with completely different responses. And this is where we're coming from with the concept of reality is what you make of it, because it depends entirely on what you're looking at as how things are coming as to where it's good or bad or mediocre or whatever. When people say healthy or slim, what does that mean? An example I've used many times is like grades and numbers. If you get a 75, does that mean you failed the test? Some people would say that yes, they failed. They expected an A. Some people, 75, would have them jumping for joy because they expected to fail and they were perfectly happy to get the 75. It's a number. That's all it is. It's the way the student is looking at it that determines whether or not it's a good number or bad number. We could say, what if you had $500 in your savings account? Some of you would be panicked because you thought you were going broke. Others of you would be so thrilled because you'd have money. It's just the number, and it's the way you're looking at this to determine whether it's a good or bad thing. You could say, is it raining? The people in New Mexico who were experiencing the wildfires last week would be perfectly happy to, and probably were wishing that some of that storm from Alberto was coming their way to help put out the fire. Other people in Texas and Mexico were probably saying, please stay away. Again, the rain was the rain. The way people were looking at it determined the reality and how they were looking at that. Okay. Now, what does this all have to do with you? Okay. When was the last time you said something to the effect of, I can't do that? Or I'm no good at? Or I can't do math. I can't do this. I can't read well. I can't go to college. I can't get a better job. That's all related to your particular reality. Seriously. To say I can't do math, if we were face to face, I'd be willing to bet that within 15 minutes I could come up with half a dozen different times of when you've done math and you've done it successfully, and you say, oh, but that's not math. It's like, oh, yes, it is. If you're manipulating numbers, it's going to be math of some sort. If you've got children and you've helped them with their math homework, you've got to be able to understand the math well enough to be able to do that, because you can't just say, here, go. You've probably learned something. You've just got something in your head that basically says, I can't do this. So the question here is, what's, if you will, the reality of where you're getting that particular thought? What's the basis of that thought? If you say, I can't do math, or I can't go to college, or I can't get a better job, or I can't go to sleep at night, whatever, Even something as simple as going to sleep at night. When you say, I can't do that, or on the other hand, say, I can do this, that could sometimes be your reality because you're telling yourself that you can do that. You've got the ability to do it. So flip that into the I can't do that. What's the reason for you to say that? What's your proof, if you will? Can you come up with a bunch of reasons that says, I can't do this because, and also the reasons that at no other time in your life you've been able to do that? Now, granted, I can't say I've been 80 years old. Okay, that's not going to work. So I'm not going to go to quite to that extreme. But if you say something like, well, once upon a time when I was in undergraduate school, I said, I can't do science. I've learned since then to my detriment that I can't, well, I can do science. It's to my detriment because I keep wondering if I had recognized that years ago, I wonder where my life would have been today. That's the part that I always wonder about. So for the rest of my life, I'm always going to wonder if I had questioned myself or when somebody pointed something out to me about that, if I'd really taken that and thought about that and given some thought about why I told myself I could not do science, I wonder where my life would have gone. Who knows? But that's what I'm asking you to think about today. Or I'm suggesting, you don't have to, mind you, but you might want to think about it. For those of you who are parents, when your children say, I can't do this, do you basically say, okay, that's right, you can't do this, so don't worry about it? A story I heard recently, which basically triggered this whole concept of talking about reality, is a child came home from school and he had done poorly on a test, and his mother said, well, don't worry about it. Nobody in our family does math. At which point he says, okay, I don't have to worry about it. 20 years later, he discovered he could do it and he enjoyed doing it and really wished he had gone back and was able to do it because, again, in his case, life could have been very different for him if he began to have some different responses to math because it was just whatever was going on with him at that particular time. Maybe he didn't understand what the lesson was. Maybe he didn't understand the questions. Um, lots of things could have happened with the reason of getting a poor test. I remember in high school history. High school history was great for me. I did quite well. Except one day we had to take a test on the Constitution and I was sick. I really didn't feel good. But I went to school anyway, convinced my mother I was going to go to school because I didn't want to have to come back on a weekend to take the makeup test if I had missed the test. Because if I'd missed the test that day, I would have had to come on a weekend to go ahead and take the makeup test. And I didn't want to do that. So I went in and took the test, even though I was sitting there thinking, I can't see straight. I don't know what's doing, but that's beside the point. I ended up getting a C. It was the only B I had in history for my whole entire high school career. Because when my instructor came back and he looked and says, you really are sick, aren't you? That grade had nothing to do with my ability or my understanding of history. It just meant that at that particular moment in time, my neurons aren't connecting to each other because I wasn't feeling well. You may have had your mind someplace else. You may have not been taught well. Somebody may not have explained things to you. But just because you say, I can't do that, is that necessarily true? Can you come up with definitive proof? Let me put it this way. Could you come up with an argument that would convince me that you couldn't do it, that I wouldn't argue back at you? Try to think in terms of having an argument with me and see what I would say. Then if you've got some degree of evidence that you could at least perhaps maybe do this a little, what can you do about going to change that? So if you want to say, I can't go to school, why? Well, I didn't do well in high school. Okay, that was high school. What about now? If you're 35 and telling me that, I'm going to say you're not the same person you were when you were in high school. You've seen different things in the world. Now you've got a better idea for going, or get better reason rather, for going to college, because this is going to help you get a better job because you know what you want, more or less. You may not know the specific career, but you may know that you want some kind of a better job in a certain particular field kind of thing. So that you're probably going to do better in college at that particular stage than you would when you were 17 and you thought you knew all the answers and didn't want to spend another day in classroom. The perspective is totally different. Goes back to the clean room. Your perception of a clean room when you were 15 is probably not the perception of a clean room that you have right now. Unless maybe you're the parent of a 15-year-old and you understand that perception, but you know where I'm coming from with this. So my thought this week is to take a look and ask yourself, why am I telling myself this? Is it really true? What's my evidence for this? And also to ask, what's my evidence for it not to be true? And is there some way I can make a change and can learn this material so that I can do it? Maybe I'll not be, somebody really great at it. Maybe I won't win a Nobel Prize for it or anything else like that, but what can I do to get over this concept that I can't do this? And one other thing to think about, again, when you're talking to your friends and when you're talking to your children and other people, when you hear them say, I can't do this, would you basically let them go ahead and say, okay, you can't, so don't worry about it? Or would you try and to help them to realize that that was not true? If you would do that for other people, my question is why don't you do that for yourself? Okay? So I hope this gives you something to think about. If you have any questions or comments, please make a comment back to me. Please share it if you think that it would be helpful for somebody else. And let me know what you think. And we will talk to you next week. Take care. Bye.